Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Hey little fish in the bottom of the ocean, moving along in a really cool motion. Did you ever wonder where you came from? Who is the Lord of all creation? The little fish said.
Today Kenya faces a great threat of extinction to the biggest of biggest beasts. The tourism sector, which is mostly wildlife based, is regularly among the top 3 contributors to the country's GDP. I am joined by Raabia Hawa, an animal conservationist, to talk about the ordeal of poaching and wildlife conservation. Rabia, I can see carcass there. What is the story behind it?
So the carcass that we've just visited was a 20 to 25-year-old male elephant. Unfortunately, 2 years ago we lost him to a poaching incident. He was shot in the leg and suffered for quite a while before he succumbed to his injuries and fell. And unfortunately, as you can see, his face has been hacked off in order for the tusks to be removed.
What is the greatest contributor to this menace poaching, especially here at Tsavo?
It's usually the trade in ivory that drives poaching, primarily from the Far Eastern countries, but also with the ivory trade still continuing in the US and the UK. It's something that we have been trying to get change enacted upon, but that hasn't happened as effectively as we had hoped yet.
How many elephants are killed in Sabah per day?
At the moment, our poaching rate has reduced. Between 2012-2014, we were losing on average 8 elephants a day in Kenya. Majority of those were from the Sabah conservation area, but at the moment we're seeing maybe 1 every 2 weeks, so it has drastically reduced, but as far as I'm concerned, every single loss of elephants is a loss too great to bear.
Do you think the future of wildlife conservation lies in the hands of communities? Because you have the Maasai who believe that, you have to kill a lion for you to be considered as brave.
I think that the future for wildlife lies in the hands of all Kenyans. You don't have to be a community member living next to a park to do your bit to protect and conserve our heritage, As we say in Swahili, hii ni urithi yetu, so it's jukumu ni letu, yani kuihifadhi na kuilinda.
But are they included?
Of course, they're included in many ways. The issue of lion hunting by the Maasai Warani, as we say, is something that doesn't happen as often. It's maybe once in a while it'll occur. And at the moment we're really seeing bushmeat poaching on the rise, which is the huge issue for us all over the country.
And what's the solution?
People just need to stop eating bushmeat. It's not something that's healthy for you. We've had cases where if an animal has been poached using poison arrow, then you have the members of the community that are consuming that bushmeat coming up with a lot of dental problems. Their teeth fall off because of ingesting poison, and people are not aware that meat is not inspected, so it's not really the best option. It's easy to get, it's maybe the cheaper option, but it's not the best for your health, nor is it for the wildlife and for future generations to come.
But these communities feel left out. What do you have to say about that?
I actually refute that, because I think now we're seeing a huge rise in community conservancy models, where communities are now feeling the responsibility and feeling like the pride of having wildlife and living amongst wildlife, and if they can benefit through that, through tourism and other means, bringing in people from all over the world who have suffered poaching or hunting in their own various countries, in the UK, in Germany, all over Europe, and even the United States, we found that they have decimated their wildlife populations so badly that they almost have nothing left. And so for them to come all the way here to see what we have, I think we would be regressing and moving backwards if we really encouraged hunting or poaching in this country.
Okay. How safe are rangers? You're one of them. You're always in the bush, spend half of your life here. How safe are they?
Not as safe as I would like them to be. One of the things that I found in over 10 years of working with rangers is that most of them, if not all, don't have first aid training. And for me, that's a huge issue, which is why under my foundation, Ulinzi Africa Foundation and the Walk with Rangers initiative, we've been trying to train rangers on first aid, working with volunteer doctors, and trying to get them at least first response skills so that they're able to pack wounds in case they're shot, or in case they get gored by a buffalo, or they come across any injury in the field. It's really important for them to be able to practice and sort of give first aid to their fellow rangers, and that's something that I found really shocking when I discovered that they haven't been trained in first aid. So they're not as safe as I would like them to be, but hopefully we'll be able to change that step by step as we continue with our first aid training in collaboration with KWS.
So that's the role the government is playing in collaboration with you.
KWS is a huge player. As an organization, I depend on KWS to provide backup support, for example. I'm sure that by now you've seen the differences between community rangers and KWS rangers. And it's really important for us to work together, because community rangers are not armed, whereas you can be walking in the field but something happens, so you need that added layer of protection, as it were. But at the same time, a lot of communities feel intimidated by men walking around with guns, and so they don't give out a lot of information, which is where the community rangers come in and play a really important part. But also the kind of skill sets that they have. Community rangers come from the areas that the conservation is going on, and so they're able to track really effectively. And those are skill sets that really are irreplaceable, and we need everyone to work together for the sake of wildlife.
Let's talk about Sabah, where we are. Why is there such a huge number of poaching, deforestation, it being the largest and oldest national park in Kenya?
I mean, I think the challenges for Tsavo Conservation Area in general are quite vast. One is, if you take Tsavo National Park, for example, it's the size of Israel, the country, and you've got tens of thousands of troops manning the borders, whereas here you've just got a few thousand rangers that are supposed to be walking every day and trying to, find bad people doing bad things. And it's not easy to cover the space that we need, to cover the area that we need to be effective in our patrols.
What do you do during your patrolling?
We track, so mostly we look for signs of illegal activity. So we have to stay really quiet, like walk really silently, so that we have all our other senses exposed to the elements. So your sense of smell, for example, in case somebody's burning charcoal somewhere, you can get the smell on the wind. If there's a carcass somewhere, you can get the smell of a carcass and the rotting flesh on the wind. But also sounds, if you hear somebody chopping down a tree, for example, or sights, like if you see tracks of another human being in the ground, which could be a herder, whereby you'll see his footprints and then you'll see lots of cow footprints on the side as well, but it could be a poacher as well, where you'll find that they're following footsteps of either elephant or giraffe or zebra or other wildlife, in which case you just continue tracking them through the day until you hopefully manage to catch them.
Burning of ivory in Kenya, what is its significance?
For me, the ivory burn was really important for two reasons. Obviously, one is to send a message to the global community and to poachers that we're not going to tolerate ivory trade, and we believe that ivory belongs on elephants and they're worth more alive. They don't belong on somebody's desk or on somebody's arm or as a pair of earrings. To lose a giant like this for the sake of making bangles or earrings, hi-fi, yani, I'm not happy with that. But the second reason that I felt the ivory burn was so important was because it's a body part of an elephant, right? And for you, for example, when we're burying human beings, when we bury our dead, we don't cut off a finger because we loved that person so much and we need something to remember that person by. And so I don't understand why people feel the need to hold on to body parts of dead animals. I think that the ivory burn was the best thing that we could have done in honor of what we have lost.
Rabia, let's talk about the similarity between human beings and elephants. In terms of when one elephant dies, what do they do like human beings?
One of the things that we see when we come across an elephant carcass is we see a lot of signs of activity from the family of that elephant. And I would like to talk about one incident in particular where we were driving just on a regular patrol and there were just so many elephants, like herds of 30 elephants, and as soon as they walked to the other side, 60 more elephants came, and they went away and 20 more elephants came, and they were just these large herds of elephant, and we started wondering, like, where are these elephants going? Like, what's going on here? Because it's a very unusual activity. And you know, after they all left, we waited for quite a while, over an hour. And after they all left and cleared the scene, we started tracking them to see where they were going and what was going on, because we had no idea. And we actually came across the carcass of a freshly poached elephant. And that was, it was so touching for us, you know, to see and start seeing all the signs of activity around her body. They were trying to feel her and trying to, like, almost arrange her in a way that would be comfortable for her. And you know, just between myself and the rangers, we were really thinking, like, she must have been really an important figure in elephant society for so many to come and visit her in that way, and to really pay their respects to this elephant. We have no idea what her story was, but we just knew that she was a very important figure to a lot of elephant herds, and not just her own family. And that was something very unique that we saw. And it really reminded me, if you don't mind me sharing, it really reminded me of a passage in the Quran that talks about, we have created among you nations like yourselves. And that really hit home for me, because they're just like us, but we just treat them so badly.
Wow. Let's talk about baby elephants, the calves. What happens to them when their mother is poached?
They're usually very confused, really disoriented, trying to wake up their dead mother, trying to, you know, trying to bring her back to life, and it's very painful to see that. Sorry.
No problem.
It's really painful to see that as human beings we can orphan something just for the sake of a bangle or chopsticks. Like, it just doesn't make sense, and it's not right.
Let's talk about the countries that are involved in buying the ivory. Which ones are they?
So it's usually the Far Eastern countries. And at the moment there is supposed to be a ban enacted on ivory trade within those countries, but it hasn't been enforced properly yet. And so,
why? Do you feel that it is our government that is not actually pushing through with this, or what is the problem exactly?
Actually, I would like to say that Kenya has been one of the strongest voices for elephants among elephant range states, as we call them, in the African Elephant Coalition, which is all the African countries that have elephants sort of come together. And Kenya has really maintained its stance against ivory trade and maintaining the moratorium on ivory, which is governed by CITES, which is the Conference on International Trade in Endangered Species. And so I'm really proud of Kenya to keep maintaining that no trade stance on ivory and rhino horn, because I think that we have the power to lead the way in wildlife conservation, and I really hope that never changes.
Yes, Rabia, let's now go into politics. Recently, there has been the biggest calamity, okay, whereby 10 rhinos died, okay, due to the translocation to Tsavo. What are your thoughts on that?
At the end of the day, nothing's going to bring those rhinos back. They're dead, they're gone, it's a forever thing. But we need to recognize the scale of the problem that has been created and do something about it collectively as Kenyans.
We will be taking a short break, so do not move a muscle, as in the next segment we will continue the conversation on poaching and wildlife conservation.
I am Jackson Kikon from Work with Rangers, Ulinzi Africa organization. I'm demonstrating here the tracking, how to track a poacher footprints. Instead ya aende hivi ndio asionekane anaenda hivi, anaenda na nyuma hivi, anaenda na nyuma hivi, ndio mtu mwingine unaweza dhani huyu mtu anaenda hii direction, lakini ni kuvuka anavuka ndio aende direction nyingine.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Your maker, by whose will do you crawl and do you swim? Who controls everything?
Welcome back to the show. I am with Raabia Hawa talking about poaching and wildlife conservation. Rabia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aisha.
Rabia, what are some of the tactics these poachers are using to easily get these animals in their hands?
There's various methods that poachers use. One is they'll use poisoned arrow or spears, and they also lace fruits. So, for example, to catch elephants, or to kill elephants rather, they would put poison in pineapples or watermelons and then just put them on elephant trails. We've also found 6-inch nails that you use for construction, and they just put poison on the top of the nail and stick them in a block of wood, and they'll hide those on wildlife trails as well. But the most common method that they use to poach is snaring, which is just a normal wire that they set in the bush, which is very, very hard to see. And they use that for trapping anything from small dikdiks, which are the tiniest antelope in Africa, to elephants and giraffes, zebras, impalas, kudus, literally absolutely everything. And
so they leave no stone unturned.
Exactly. It's easy to find wires and to set them. They'll take out wires from bikes, from like the tires of bikes. Sometimes they'll use cable wires. They also get wires from earphones. So if you have like an old pair of earphones, they'll find it somewhere in the litter and they'll take out the wires from inside. They'll use that to trap wildlife as well. But one of the most brutal methods of poaching that I've personally found, and we found that set for elephants and giraffes, is barbed wire snare. And the thing about snares is it's indiscriminate, so anything can get caught in it. We've had cases of lion, leopard caught in snare. And obviously that's not what they're looking for. They're after sort of animals that they can sell the meat from. And so when they find a lion or a leopard, they'll just leave it there to die in agony.
What? Okay, can we get practical about this? I want to see how exactly it happens.
The teams have found a few snares that were reported in this area, and they've been scouring, obviously. We've kind of swept the bush, and we've found a few, and I'm just going to show you how they set them, and we're going to try and take them out. Again, one thing to remember is when a poacher does set a snare, he won't just set one. He'll put one and he'll put about 4 or 5 or sometimes dozens in the same area. And so we'll just see how many we're able to collect today.
Let's do this.
Cool. There is actually a snare here. It's just very, very difficult to see because they camouflage it so well and they use the natural environment, so sticks and twigs, to kind of set it. So it's quite difficult to spot the first time. But once you know what you're looking for and how they've made the structure, then you know how to find the rest of them pretty easily. Can you see it?
I can't see anything. You can just see twigs here.
It's right there.
But I can't see it.
I'm gonna let John show you where it is.
OMG. And how can you see it? What makes you see it?
For us it's a little easier because we've been doing it for so long. You normally follow the tracks of the poacher, so you'll always find footprints that lead you somewhere, and then you start spotting them one after the other. And the thing about a snare is when an animal gets in, they'll usually, like this is set for a small animal, you can see from the height of the snare, and once it gets in through the head, it gets stuck in there. And then as he tries to free himself, it starts getting tighter and tighter, so it'll either strangle it to death or it'll start cutting into the flesh, Can
you demonstrate for us?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll let John do the demo.
Dikdiki akipita hapa sasa tuseme hii ni kichwa ya dikdiki. Sasa akipita sasa unajua hii waya inamkamata hivi. Alafu sasa ikisha kamata unaona vile ina. Sasa ni shingo.
And you can see how tight that is.
Sasa hii
it's really, really tight.
Mwishowe ananyonga na nakufa.
For example, if a dikdik's head goes in there and he tries to immediately run out because he's felt like something's caught him, it starts getting tighter and tighter. And then as he tries to free himself, it gets really tight and starts cutting into the flesh because it's a really sharp wire. And you can feel it for yourself. Like if you put your hand in there,
I might try that.
I'm just gonna, you could just put your hand in there and try and pull now.
It gets tighter and tighter.
Yeah, don't do too much because you
my
will
hand
get cut.
I'll be poached.
Yeah,
by Rabia.
you'll get very badly injured. And so this is the kind of thing that we find all the time. And every time we do find it, we've got to take it out. If you try to struggle, it'll get tighter.
Lord.
Yeah, so you have to just be really, like, if you do get caught, like sometimes rangers do get caught in snares, especially if they're spring snares, so they lift you up. But the best thing to do is just to stay calm, because if you try and struggle, you're just getting yourself more and more caught. So you just stay calm and you just slowly free yourself.
What time do they actually have to put all this up?
I mean, I'm sure you've seen from the patrols we've conducted so far, you cover really vast areas. And so, for example, if we're covering this area today, we won't be doing this area tomorrow, unless there's a report that's come in, so we'll do a different area. For today, we're just going to continue our patrol and see what else we can find. Now that we found one, I'm sure we're going to find a lot more. So maybe we can continue doing that.
Most people have this illusion that only elephants are poached. So what trap is this?
This is actually a very different kind of trap that we find around, and it's mostly set for kanga or bustard, like the very small fowl. Francolins sometimes get caught in it as well, and it's equally as strong, and they normally use a nylon cord in the center so that it starts cutting as it chokes.
This is very well thought out. So how does it work?
So what they first do is they make sure that they find sort of a trail, like a path where the wildlife use. Wildlife don't just walk everywhere. They have certain trails that they use. And then once they've identified where they want to locate it, they'll cover the sides with thorn branches, because wildlife will avoid walking through thorns. So they'll cover the sides with thorn branches. So yani ahakikishe mnyama asipite kwa miba, asipite kwa sides, lazima apite hapa katikati. Ndio ashikike vizuri. Sasa akipita na hapa ndani, hata unaweza ingiza tu mkono uone vile inakubana. So, yani upitishe ukienda mbele kama vile unatembea yani.
Rudi cha nyuma.
Ngoja.
Rudi cha nyuma.
Ingia yani hapo katikati. Yeah, because hapo ndio, that's where they're going to pass.
Sasa ushashikika.
Yeah, but just try and continue going ahead as if you're a bird.
Oh,
yeah,
this center.
because it's
My
normally.
God, this is so well thought out. I am even confused. So
no, but it's for bird. So
yeah,
bird doesn't
so
have
bird
a head that big.
Yeah.
It's like this much, right?
Wow.
So they'll go in this way, but the body is big.
Yeah,
right?
so it will get trapped.
So they'll go in this way. Try and walk, and then it starts cutting and cutting and cutting. So kitambo yo mwindaji afike ashashika.
So they make regular walks because they put this in place so that they can time the animals, and after that they just come for them. Whatever they're looking for, they will get.
Exactly. And what they do sometimes is they usually have like timings, like they won't come when the full moon is out, for example, because they know that they'll be easily seen. And so they wait for the moon to come down a little bit, and then they'll come out. They'll usually return to check their snares every 2 days. And so when we find a snare, we don't leave it in the bush, because obviously an animal can die. We take it out, but then we go back to the site after a night or after 2 nights, and we lay a night ambush, and that's when they get caught.
Wow.
Yeah.
But now, Rabia, I want to know the relationship between wildlife and the environment. Tell me, give me some examples of some animals, how they are, how they depend on each other, how they love each other. Because we just see them as wild animals, but we don't know their inside story.
So with wildlife, it varies. Each species has their own way of interacting with its family members. With dikdiks, which is why with dikdik snaring, it's so painful for us to see, because they pair for life. So if one dies, the other one is left very lonely, and a lot of times will just spend its life on its own until it finds maybe another widowed dikdik, and then they'll try and partner up. But usually they pair for life, and when you kill one, you're effectively breaking down the family. Another thing that I can maybe mention to you about wildlife and their relation to the environment is there's a specific species of tree, and that tree can't germinate unless the seeds have passed through the gut of an elephant.
What?
Yeah, so even
Those
if
are the
you...
elephants we are poaching.
Exactly. So even if you take the seeds and you plant them everywhere, they cannot germinate unless they pass through the gut of an elephant. And that's why for us we call elephants the gardeners of the forests, because they're so critical to maintaining the habitat and ecosystem, and again for maintaining healthy water towers like the forest, the Aberdares, where all our water comes from for drinking. And so for me it's about looking at the larger scope of things in terms of the value of wildlife. They do provide ecosystem services that are irreplaceable, and that's something we really need to respect and maintain.
Recently there has been a lot of infrastructure and development, as in any country, also Kenya, we want to go forward. How does this affect wildlife conservation?
In terms of development in general, negatively, we found that the rates of human-wildlife conflict have increased since the SGR has come up in the Tsavo conservation area specifically, because the wildlife migratory corridors are effectively cut off. They're interrupted, and so the animals don't know where to go, and they end up clashing with communities in their search for pasture and water. And so that's a huge, huge issue at the moment. I do think that development is important, but it's also really critical for development to be sustainable. And for us as conservationists, we're really seen as the noisemakers, like sisi ndio tunapinga, tunapinga development, hatutaki development, but si ati hatutaki hiyo maendeleo, ni vile tu tunaomba yani kwa ajili ya uhifadhi ya wanyama, mazingira, misitu, na pia kwa urithi wetu yani. It's really important for us to maintain sustainable development, and it's not impossible. I mean, all you need to do is really figure out how to do overpasses or underpasses so that the wildlife corridors are maintained, they can still freely move, and they don't clash with communities, because when wildlife suffer, people suffer too.
Rabia, I want you to give me examples from this development. Over here we have the SGR, we have Tsavo East, Tsavo West. What have you seen with your eyes that is happening here because of development and infrastructure to these animals?
I've seen a lot of changes in animal behavior. They get quite confused, they don't really know which way to go. And again, one of the big signs for us is the increase in human-wildlife conflict, and human-elephant conflict has been a huge increase as well. So that's one of the big things that I've seen since the advent of the, as we call it, the iron snake.
Oh, okay. And then another thing, I've seen pictures on social media whereby the elephants are literally passing through that SGR. Is it happening, or is it just pictures that we're seeing, maybe made up?
It's happening, but we have also had animals that have been killed trying to do that. Including lions, so lion, buffalo, and that for us is quite a big loss.
What other factors lead to distracting this wildlife?
Changes in land use. When something like a railway comes in, then people start subdividing plots, and then that effectively cuts off migratory corridors. And again, we have to remember that we are sharing a resource regionally with Tanzania as well. For example, between the Tsavo ecosystem and Mkomazi in Tanzania, the wildlife are moving. Between Serengeti and the Mara, the wildlife are moving, and that's really, really important for the purpose of maintaining healthy gene pools, because if you start locking in wildlife, then you have a risk of inbreeding and overpopulation, which then degrades the environment.
Is there anything else that can relate to the audience out there to understand the importance of conserving our environment and our animals included in it?
I could give you an example of Mzima Springs, which is located within Tsavo West. Tsavo West was gazetted as a national park in a protected area because it was really sort of bringing in a lot of tourist attention. People want to see the red elephants of Africa and the red elephants of Tsavo, and so that's really been a huge income earner for the country and has increased and contributed to our GDP. But then aside from that, has managed to ensure the protection of Mzima Springs. If we didn't have protection of Mzima Springs, you and I can only imagine what would happen. Someone would go and start a water bottling plant there, you'd have people washing their clothes in there, and what would end up happening effectively is you cut off the only source of fresh water for the entire human population of the coast region. Everyone in Mombasa, from Voi onwards, they all depend on Mzima Springs as a source of fresh water, and that's something that I think is important.
Rabia, to wrap up this show, the big five that we all boast of in Africa. Is there a day that will come that this topic of poaching will be dead and buried? Will our children get to see these beautiful animals that we have grown up seeing?
I mean, I guess I could answer that by saying I don't really know, because I can't foresee the future. My hope is that we preserve what we have. For me, yeah, I live in hope every single day, knowing that it could be my last, but also knowing that I've done something for the sake of future generations. I really believe that working to preserve wildlife and the environment is something that should be seen as a duty for every Muslim. And there's a passage in the Quran to that effect as well, where we are custodians of the earth, and that's in Surah Al-Baqarah. You could own a business, you could make millions, but at the end of the day, if your children and your grandchildren aren't going to have access to fresh water, hawezi kula pesa.
You've heard it from Rabia. What she is doing is not new to Islam. As dating back to the Prophet's time, there was this lady who was a prostitute, and she quenched the thirst of a dog. That one good deed led her to Jannah. I have been your host, Aisha Khan. Goodbye. Ma'assalam from the bush.
Everything I have, everything I own, everything I eat is thanks to you. Every breath I take, every bird I hear, every smile I see is thanks to you. Alhamdulillah.